it was for a higher juicy news. Mema Obibia Akwaba. I had the latest hot and one era mede bremo. And unti se unya subscribe to channel dia bomodin share or be subscribe. There be an share or click a year the subscribe button no. Na wa barely notification no. We have a video for bia be upload no. When the first person was sa ebeka a year sa video. Afi we are na wa like video no give us a thumbs up na afi share ma wo fufuro so na wenye bi hwe na wo hu ensem dodo na ara ekoso ewo Ghana me mu hanam afi yembura ye ensem a abeto yepno so gumayinti eye sa report ya ababetu dwa gumayinti sansem
container ba yesi ye wia na yeguso ka ho asem e debate NAPO wo ho no ne energy minister Dubik wo ho no ye former ECG boss ye wo procurement director omunyina wo ho bepem ne yeda so toto papa so
and I was disappointed in Afenyo board chairman ese e wo ho dada
nanka this time kwa we senka Afenyo Markin ya che no enye e frɛ no ya che no because a board chairman say winning board system now corporate governance now we see we ntimi nya bibia without board's approval. My quick comment just 2 minutes patch on ECG.
Okay.
Unim say ECG no the first masters me project thesis na ye on ECG me topic no na ye the effect of performance, the effect of vision and mission on the performance of Ghanaian companies. Case study ECG. Into the nam person me share and they say on say a mission here mission of a company here the company ni gina ho say wo ye
nani suade huna
da mission here ebia
ni dwumadi
a wodie die ntia wote adwuma no
right
ehun adwuma no ye vision here wani suade hunu enti nam person me hwe ECD adwuma ene o mani suade hunu enti wo ko ba bia ye fra bibi credo.
Right.
Credo CREDO. On say oba multimedia and now ko baby near the bibia boho near tell vision near chro mission near chro core values. Enti okwa company now utimu say we no mugina ho okwa bank near chro so we are for this that good. Enti nam person me share ECG for mu mission no and no mu vision ma hwe as against their performance.
Right.
Only time year start project 2012. 2012 na me yes our project no. She NC. In fact, the other second project I me was on ECG. Now only them here on no message bibi e friend balance scorecard. You can balance scorecard. You be catch you say first no you can say company aya dia na ese wenye sika bibri.
Right.
But Kaplan any Norton, Dr. Kaplan any Dr. Norton.
Right.
Omo na keka bom hu say you can say company bia ye and yet just because of money nkwa.
Sure.
Nemum bako apart from financial performance no. The second one bibi e friend no internal business processes.
Okay.
Internal business processes in there. E kwan yo mu fa so yo mu nioma. What you say bia container ne ba wan ne be kwa kofa container no ne e de akohene. Ana say bia mechanic san me kwa ana me wo problem with ECG na me fra e kwan be so ne fa so internal business process.
Sure.
And also me hwe sa de no. ECG ne enkoyi. The third one a customer service delivery. It's Dr. Kaplan and nothing say and yes he can kwase beka say oh ECG enye sika
sure
na emom ekwa mu fa so yo mu nioma omu customer service
see satisfied
now nim dia omu moto ECG no moto
omuzin
delighting in the customer is our ultimate goal now in quality management in quality management no see a catch them say delighting na unim delighting even woko marketing management ye free bibi perception what you say
sure
and actuals enti perception here perception as against expectation
right
and ye dia hwese nipa no satisfied enti akokwa ebia wo hu na jantwa
sure
mi wo sika unim se mo sika pa enti anya bia me no di nkomo wi a wo be expect say me ma sika
sure
anya bia se me ma ebia me ne kwa me despite se me fra wo se brafie ne edi nkoma anya bia wonim se awie a me maska mama wo kra de ebi kra wo 2000 bi de me de be ma wo
enti de mimi hu ni se be makoma ato me yemu a me hwehwe free wo no
de wo akoma mu no se bia
menya free wo
at least 2000 bi ba me wie anam so je 500 bi What it means is that the nation will trim the mimi susu se uhiano when anje. And you say if expectation, the mere expectation is greater than perception, dear Odema I'll be dissatisfied.
Sure.
Name of young friend is a nan can hear 2,000, we expect 2,000. But I am so akukwa. 5,000 be.
Abroso.
What it means is that yes, perception is lesser than expected. That's what I expected. Me it was less. Me expected 2,000. And no, your friend is say you are delighted. And you are delighted. It just say the na when na so no when ya broso. And ECG can delighting in our customer is our ultimate goal. A chance sensu to ECG doom so ni ho. Technical challenges ni ho. Omunyo me yesa de beya sa nyoma eni ho. And then can say delighting in our customer is our ultimate goal. Sa nyoma we no ye. And doctor can say baako performance internal customer service. The last 1 year innovation and learning. Seni pano. I was say do be omusua de ehun the best practices. Ya tena ho agi atum container ba yesi ewia na yeguso ka ho asem debate. NAPO ho no ne energy minister Dubik wo ho no ye former ECG boss ye wo procurement director omunyina wo ho bepem ne ye da so toto papa so.
And I was disappointed in Afenyo board chairman ese e wo ho dada
na nka this time kwa I was saying ka Afenyo Markin ya che no enye e frɛ no Yachino. Because a board chairman, so winning board system now, corporate governance now. We see you want to mean BBR without board's approval. Into procurement, no, a core board. Procurement, let me come here to Jessica, or bra, a Jumani Yam Mayeno, Afenyo Markins. Not on the side. And she ain't me young crater.
Right.
And it's not done be a good JJ Suno. Wrapping up. JJ Suno, John Jinapo, this is a simple issue. And we needed any say. So far, oh, yeah, the NYA who's a they call. But I am not satisfied. Unless Afenyo, NAPO, ECG, procurement director, technical directors, no. Unya nipas have 5 we are. Ebe me solutions, bra. No.
We've been joined by the minister.
Right.
The minister in charge of energy and green transition. John Jinapo is joining us right now on Zoom for some further exclusive detail to this matter. Mr. Jinapo, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Is my sound okay?
It's better. I can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, let me stay on you a bit. How far back did the investigation by the committee reveal as to how long this thing has been going on? I mean, the containers not being accounted for, and as Senor mentioned, auctioning of containers. Because he says when he was serving on this advisory board of the energy ministry, the ECG at the time said, based on his own information, this thing started as far back as 2022. But is that consistent with what the committee found in their investigation?
Thank you very much. First of all, maybe from what is happening, I should have broadened the scope of the committee. I didn't even know these containers were missing. My main focus was, first at the transition, I was given a figure of 3,000 containers. Then on the 17th, I was sworn in. On the 24th, I visited the harbor myself to see for myself the status of these containers. When I went there, I was given another figure of 2,500. So I got a bit alarmed. I said, why 3,000, why 2,500? So I believed the president, and we thought that we should set up a committee to look into the matter and advise us on how to clear them. My main focus was how can we get these containers out of the port quickly, because they had incurred demurrage of about 1.5 billion. You know, demurrage keeps compounding. And so I asked them what happens eventually. I was told that sometimes GAPOA attempts to auction the containers. And so my primary focus was how do we get the containers out quickly so we can save cost. Only for the committee to come and tell me that, look, contrary to the 2,500 you were given, 1,346 containers cannot be accounted for. On ECG's books or documents, they have 2,500 thereabouts. But when we went there to do a detailed count of the containers, they realized that a lot of them were not available. So that was the scope of the committee. And so I agree with Senyor's suggestion that this should just be a starting point. Now we have to get into the details. And also they took the opportunity to look at the procurement structure of ECG. That is where they realized that, for instance, in 2022, and that answers your question, the system began to decay, particularly from 2022. Because if you look at 2022, and you look at the value of procurement, then you realize that they began to deviate. Then by 2023, their planned procurement, and normally plan means that that's what the board has approved, was 935 million Ghana cedi, almost $1 billion. But by the end of the year, 2023, they had procured 8.3 billion. So they procured about 7.4 billion more than had been approved. And the 1 billion was approved because of their revenue streams. So when you shoot the procurement by 7.3 billion, the containers will come and they'll get stuck at the port because you don't have the money to clear them. But that did not stop there. One would have thought that, having experienced that, in the next year, the board would have insisted that they stick to their procurement plan and also put together a plan to clear those containers. And if you look at page 13 of the report, 2024, their approved budget was 1.397 billion. By the end of the year, their procurement was 8.2 billion. So if you put 2023 and 2024 together, just these 2 years, they procured more than 14 billion what their budget could accommodate. And that is the source of all these problems.
More than 14 billion.
More than 14 billion.
CDs.
In 2 years, CDs. Over the 2 years, their procurement should have been less than 2.6 billion thereabout. But they shot it by 14 billion. And the unfortunate thing is, the containers get to the port. The containers contains cables. ECG is unable to clear the containers, and yet they are ordering more of the same cables. I mean, it doesn't make sense at all. Because you have containers stuck at the port. They contain aluminum cables. You claim you don't have money to clear those cables, and yet you are placing orders for more of the same aluminum cables. And that is why they end up with some factories. These factories then melt these brand new aluminum cables into aluminum rods, export them to China, and they convert those rods into aluminum cables again. And ECG then orders those same aluminum cables again back into the country. They are unable to clear them, and they get back to this factory. And so it's been a syndicate. It's like a cartel that has been operating. And so it's good that this has come up. And I'm happy that all of us are discussing these issues. The issue of invitation of the MD and all those would follow now. In fact, what the committee did was basically to look at the reports and to reconcile a lot of the documentation. Now that this report is out, and we've written to the investigative agencies and the law enforcement agencies, I'm sure that the former MD, current executives, everybody would be given a fair hearing and a fair opportunity. For instance, if the procurement is more than 7 billion in 2023, you'll be asked questions. Why did you procure over and above what was the mandate, what was the rationale, and all that would involve that. Then these containers, I do know that they have serial numbers. They are received at the port. There's a manifest, there's customs, there's dapaah, and all of them are cooperating so far. So you need a team to go in detail and do a forensic analysis and trace the numbers. When were they received? Who signed off the containers? Who took charge of the containers? Were they delivered to ECG? Is it because maybe there's some poor records? We need to investigate all of that so that we'll get to the bottom of it. And also internally, we need to restructure ECG. Decouple the procurement unit from the estates unit and put a qualified procurement personnel. And that is where I thought, my good friends, Senor, let's take a second look at it, because if you don't get a qualified person to man the procurement, he wouldn't appreciate a lot of these issues, and you're going to have these lapses. The MD's mandate, he has a mandate where he can give a contract of below $1 million. And so a day he can decide to sign 15 contracts, 900, 900, 900. We must look at that again and tighten it further so that we can see what is happening. And even the agents that they contracted, some of them are not registered clearing agents. They are not registered, so they take the contract and then go and give it to a third party. And so even in terms of checks and balances and accountability, it becomes a major problem. But so far, the arrests we've made and the information available indicates that 2022, 2023, 2024, it was very, very pervasive. And those are the areas or the years that we are focusing on.
And well, then that's consistent with what Senor indicated earlier. And I started with him because he served on the advisory board of the Ministry of Energy between 2020, 2022. That's the first part of during Nana Akufo Addo's administration.
I've been on the Ministry Advisory Board, I think, from 2014 to 2022.
I see. No, yeah. That's a long period. I mean, that's about what, 8 years?
He's right. Yes. And you see, the report clearly shows the years. So, for instance, if you take 2022, if you look at their procurement, single source 33, board approval 0.
0.
So what it means is that the whole of 2022, and you can check from page 12, you see the table. The table below explains the excessive use of single source procurement as opposed to more competitive methods. Of the 142 contracts awarded, 0 went to the board for approval. But when it goes to the board, then you have a 9-member team that would evaluate it. Then 2023, 703 contracts were awarded. Only 21 went to the board. Then 2024, 601 contracts were awarded. Only 7 went to the board. 425 single source. So clearly, it tells you that that's where the problem is coming from.
But help me understand this, because if you're talking about this number of contracts awarded and just a fraction of it goes to the board. I mean, 703, only 21 goes to the board. 601, only 7 goes to the board. Who awards these contracts, and how are they executed, for instance, without the MD's notice, or as it were, he also notifying the board?
The MD who awards the contracts. The MD. The MD awards the contract.
So in this instance, he fails to notify the board?
No. You see, there are 2 ways. You take the contract to the board for approval before you even execute it.
Right.
Or you execute it based on the limit. And like I said, he has a limit of $1 million. So he can choose to sign off every day 10 contracts or 5 contracts within that threshold. And so by the end of the year, you have a lot of contracts, but all these contracts would not go to the board. But then there will be a report to the board. And I thought the board would then have insisted from 2022 that, look, no, how come in 2022 we didn't have the opportunity to approve these contracts? 2023 will not allow it. 2024 will not allow it. And so, for instance, this year, 2025, the norm should be that as much as possible, they have to go to the board. It's only under emergency circumstances that the MD usually would exercise that authority or mandate. But now it's become the norm rather than the exception. And as you can see from the figures, these are some of the systemic failures that we have to correct immediately.
I asked this question because Senior had earlier made reference to what the former MD, Samuel Dubik Mahama, is reported to have said, that he wasn't aware of some of these happenings and the details of it. You said he was not aware.
No, he was not invited to the committee. That's all.
Yes, but I'm quoting what you
said. No. Aware that he's signing the contract. He signs the contract. Who else signs the contract? None of these contracts have been done without the visibility of the MD. Nobody goes around and signs up to $1 million. Who has the mandate? He's the one who has it. He's raised issues about auctioning. He's not aware of the auctioning. And that's, maybe it's the auctioning
so
also.
That's all. That's
the auctioning.
So I just wanted, because you
the contract is the contract is the one doing it.
Yes, because
it's the auctioning that he's raised issues with.
But in 2022, you questioned him.
Yes.
Why that was being done, and he, according to you, he explained that the ECG owed, they had debts, and so they had to auction to pay.
No. Let me go over this again. I'm saying that ECG has excused their inability to clear the cargo for lack of money. All right? Then the question is, if you can't clear cargo and you have so much, why are you buying more? That is what my minister is saying. Then the next question is, they were hoping to have a switch, a swap of government indebtedness to ECG with their duties so that they can get
the money.
Yeah, those were the issues that were raised at the time. But it's also neither here nor there. The key thing here is that these are assets of the state. Why are they not accounted for? 2, why do we get to where we are? And the issues that NAPO is raising is even more serious. I mean, no ratification by the board. Do we just have a budget? There are 2 ways in management, and I'm not going to now speak to ECG as a limited liability. In management, you go to your board for approval. The directing body of an entity is the board. They are ultimately responsible. The directors of a company are ultimately responsible. So, Minister, I'm hoping that this matter, we don't leave it hanging as a policy matter. The directors of ECG must be held responsible, everyone within that time. They are responsible for what has happened. If we can't account for it, they are responsible for what has happened. You know that contracts are going. What's the efficiency in it? The reason why I was saying that we can't blame this on the qualification of the procurement head is because these are fundamental things that you don't even need procurement expertise to be able to manage. If you are not a certified or a chartered procurement professional, it does not excuse you to make this kind of errors or these kinds of omissions. How do you give contracts when you don't have capacity?
Okay.
2, how is it that you don't account for things? Even you, Minister, you are not a chartered procurement person. You wouldn't do what is being done. So that is the matter. People must learn to be responsible. Don't hide it. I didn't have the qualifications, so I couldn't do it. It's not that. Just common sense. It's more color matter.
Okay, but you see, there's another aspect of the report that, Mr. Janapo, you touched on briefly. I'm looking at the page 1.4 summary of the key findings: excessive procurement. in 2022, I see single-sourced contracts 33. In 2023, that single-source contracts figure rises to 512. And I'm seeing the proposals and the opposition to more of these competitive methods that were found out. Now, what was, that is because you say you've started engaging and having people answer questions. What was the reasoning behind awarding such high numbers of single source contracts within a particular year?
That is the question.
And that is where the procurement man says he was under pressure.
Under pressure from
so
where?
It means that from above. And the question is, and that's what Afenyo asks, who is the above? Who is that above who puts pressure on you to sign such outrageous contracts? You know, my brother, let's face it. Let's face it. What happened is condemnable. It's not good. It's not the best. It should never happen. And it shouldn't have happened. I mean, you can't award contracts 1 year, 33. The next year, 512. I mean, what has changed between 2022 and 2023 such that you have such a ballooning of contracts? And then, like Senor said, then you realize that you're unable to clear the containers. Instead of you to slow down, 2024 is getting worse. And you see, these things, there's always a lag. What will happen is that most of these things, you feel the effects in subsequent years. So this year, for instance, we are saddled with a debt of 80 billion cedis in the energy sector, arising directly from ECG. 80 billion, that is how much we need today to be able to satisfy IPPs, fuel producers, and suppliers. And every day, suppliers to ECG come to my office complaining that banks are threatening to sell their houses, banks are chasing them, and they are struggling, and I'm helpless. Look, the money we get, we have to use it to pay IPPs, we have to use it to buy fuel, we have to use it to pay gas producers. And so virtually nothing is left for ECG to be able to pay these suppliers. And most of these suppliers are Ghanaian businessmen who've gone to the banks to raise loans. It means that you're going to have a high level of default. And then non-performing loans will go up. The banks will now be compelled to increase interest rates so that decent people like and Co who are going to look for money, they'll be paying higher interest rates, and it can lead to banks collapsing. So this that you might just stay down and think that it's just an ECG related affair. And that's why Senor said the finance ministry and all of us ought to be concerned. It can affect the fiscal, and that will impact everybody. And worst of all, these are equipment that we need to supply power to the people of Ghana. Now the equipment are being sold, they are being auctioned off, some are being stolen. And so it even affects the supply of power to everybody in this country. So those who are on social media and trying to get overly political, look, this affects all of us. And I think that one, we must stop that immediately. We must reform ECG. We must cut costs and make it more efficient. We must also hold people responsible for their actions and inactions. We must retrieve these containers wherever they are. Either we retrieve the goods or we retrieve the monetary value from those who are engaged in this activity. When we do that, we'll be making some progress as a country. And that is my focus. I'm very happy that President Mahama is giving me all the assurance and all the support to do what is right and proper. This should have been done years ago. Be that as it may, let's take this opportunity and clean the system. Look, I get very worried every day when I look at the energy sector figures. I get very, very worried. We need 2.5 billion every month to satisfy all the value chain players. We get only 1.3 billion. So what it means is that every month we incur a loss of 1.2 billion. So by the end of the year, you can imagine the cost to the state. And then we have to then call on the Minister of Finance to use monies that we're supposed to use for health, education, infrastructure to pay for somebody's negligence or inefficiency. Something must stop, and somebody must stop this and begin to turn the curve.
So the reason why I stayed on you a bit earlier was because of your service on the advisory board of the energy sector. When this got to you, your notice in 2022, what did you do as an advisory board of the energy sector? What did you do?
I think we found it reasonable that the ministry intervenes and possibly considers the recommendations of ECG at the time. But I just left soon after, so I couldn't have done any more. But one of the things you just need to know, most of these cables are coming from China.
I see.
Now, these cables come from China. They end up in the hands of Chinese, who smells them and ship them back to China. Good morning, Ghana.
With all of this, because some of this borders on law, but a lot of it on procurement and corruption as well. ECG's position was that they were not subject to the public procurement laws. And for that matter, to the extent that there was some autonomy, they could do this without necessarily recourse to the Public Procurement Authority Act per se. The minister says that cannot be the case, but ECG went ahead to do it. So who should be held responsible for a position as taken by the company at the time, which led to they procuring these containers, even at the time when it was clear they didn't need that much?
Okay, so I see two aspects of the question. Procuring in excess of what they need, that's one side. And then the first part of the question is the ECG saying they are not subject to the procurement law. Okay, so on the matter of not being subject to the procurement law, what I'll say is that as you shared the AG's opinion with us, because it's the Attorney General's opinion, I know the Attorney General is the #1 law enforcement agent and also the government's advisor. I will go with the minister that it should be shown to the new Attorney General. You see, like sometimes we say new king, new law. It's possible. Because, you see, so what I'm doing here is that having read the opinion as a lawyer, to be objective, I see the position they've taken. By giving the same facts, another lawyer will come to a different position. So I believe that it should be litigated thoroughly. So even if the Attorney General were to take the position that he will go with, that's if Dr. Ayeni were to take the position that he will go with the previous Attorney General, for me, I'll even encourage litigation in court. Let's test it to the highest. Yes.
It's already gone to court.
The matter of this not subject.
Yes,
to,
it's already gone to court.
Is it the one that Fiamekpo? No.
I think let's see.
All right.
I'll cite the case for you.
So we should litigate it thoroughly. It thoroughly. The one I've seen, they were saying that procurement breaches should be dealt with as criminal offense. When you find it, let's go on with this. So the main point we're making is I see what the
Center for Democratic Empowerment versus ECG as defendants, Samodubik and then Kwame Jan Budu.
Okay, so it's still pending, or is that a judgment?
It's judgment.
I haven't seen it.
And
the court supports the...
Edu is familiar with it. You can speak to it.
Okay, so me, what I'm going with, all right, since I haven't seen it, what I'm going with is that obviously it looks to me like that's a high court decision. So it's not final. Yeah. Because you see, what we should be very clear is that the fact that something is law doesn't mean that it's necessarily good. No, the law itself, you can measure its quality. What we are seeing is that, right, ECG has gotten a leeway to do things that are untoward. Yes. So we should be interested in curbing it. So for me, to the extent that that is a high court decision, it doesn't close the matter. Okay. I support the minister that he should take it up with the Attorney General as step one, and then let us know publicly what the Attorney General's opinion is on it. So that if the Attorney General, as I said, it's possible he can agree with the previous one or depart. and then looking also at the high court decision. Bottom line is that because we are losing a lot of money, and because the high court decision is not final, we have Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, I believe that we should test by going further until we've exhausted all the legal avenues, until finally the Supreme Court is also looked at it, and then we would know. Then, you see, by the time the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court eventually gets a bite at it, then we know that, okay, these are the law lords. As a society, we've put them at the top, right? And you know, the Supreme Court also does a lot of policies. Not everything that you see in the black letter of the law, yet they can do policy and add, right?
The policy court, actually.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So let's litigate it to the fullest.
Okay.
Litigate it to the fullest. Then we would know. Yes, then we would know what to do. Because
but
we can't...
We don't need to wait for that. Government today has policy capacity through SIGA, to the ministries, to set procurement directives controlling every limited liability company. This is what we expect of you. So all directors should implement this.
Perfect.
You know, you don't need to wait for the law to be on. Say, look, the Constitution, these are some of the problems I have. Duties of a citizen under the directive principles of state policy. I beg this will have to change that. I beg you, please, it's very important.
Yes.
Look, the exercise and enjoyment of rights and freedoms is inseparable from the performance of duties and obligations, and accordingly, it shall be the duty of every citizen to protect and preserve public property and expose and combat misuse and waste of public funds and property. So when you are appointed as an agent of the state in a limited liability company, fundamentally, as a citizen of the country, you have a responsibility to protect. You understand? So you can't say because the law has given you this way, so you can do it. No, I never feel like no.
It still comes back to the point that you're talking about the quality of the law.
Yes, so when the quality is bad, challenge it. Challenge it. That's how come some laws are struck down. So let's pursue it that AG, then from there we look at how to go back into the court so that we get a final decision. Because otherwise then we will be leaking all the time. We'll be leaking all the time.
In the name of law.
Yes, exactly. And I like the examples people have been giving that Nazism happened, right, under law. The Holocaust. Yes, people use law to do it. Hitler and his people. Other bad things happen also under the guise of law. So let's not make the argument that once it's law, then it's kosher. No. Sometimes you have bad laws. We have bad laws. So let's go on with it. So the second part, I think Senyo has answered, the one about over-procurement. So as from what we are saying, until the strict legal side is dealt with, we can use the soft side, that's to say SIGA, whipping ECG into line. Yes, by saying we will not allow this. But for what has already happened, the over-procurement, the matter of going over 7 billion in 2023. So the question is, are we going to allow this to go? No. So I support the call that, well, with the report that has been done, they should look at how to escalate it, give it to the Attorney General, so that the management of ECG at the time, we should investigate to see how we can hold them accountable. Yes, they should see how we can hold them accountable. Don't forget Atuesian. So you remember, let's make this point so that people see. Remember when the Atuesian matter started? People said there were arguments that the liquidity support, all right, was given to this in the bank, right? That Capital Bank, as a limited liability company. So if you've lent a limited liability company money, do you have the right to determine how to use it, etc.? Eventually, it didn't fly in court. So this argument that, ECG is limited liability, so the Public Procurement Act should not apply, I am not in favor of it until it's been litigated fully. Yes. So let's remember the Atuesian case. You remember that time? People say, no. Capital Bank is a limited liability company. So if you lend government money to it, once the company is taking it, look, their only duty is to pay back. What they do with the money is nobody's business, etc. But today, is Atuesian not supposed to be in Sawam, right? Yeah, he's been convicted and then jailed. So let's use the fora for litigation to see. Of course, starting with the Attorney General first.
Indeed, that matter of accountability is a big...
Get there. There is the need to clarify something. And my sector minister has done that brilliantly. For the past week, the impression had been created that these containers got missing the moment the NDC came to power. And strangely, I saw the MPP social media team create containers with wings flying. And the whole reason was to engage in political equalization, because if you recall, when the MPP came to power, Aboboya trucks that were purchased with state, money suddenly got missing under their watch. So when this issue of the missing containers came up, they felt that, oh, finally, we've gotten something on the new NDC administration. And so they went overdrive on social media with containers with wings flying all the. So again,
politics is not serious at all.
on a platform, the Honorable Minister actually assured that these containers never got missing when he became minister. And therefore, he was going to ensure thorough investigation into the matter. Lo and behold, we woke up to see the National Security Council Secretariat and their investigators uncovering the nefarious activities of the Chinese, where we have seen about 15 Chinese nationals basically taking up these containers. But what I want to find out is that these containers are usually either in the custody of Ghana Ports and Harbour Authority. And so I want to find out. And GRA, because of the duties involved, they are under the close watch of these entities. So how in God's name did these containers just get missing? I've been thinking of, and you see, container is not something you can put in your bag. You understand? 40-footer container, you can't even wrap it in anything. And this is something that cannot move unless you put it on another car.
Or you give it a wing.
So this was a matter, and I thank Minister so much for putting this matter to rest. That this missing container did not happen under his watch. Very, very important piece of information, because it kills that propaganda ab initio. Now, on the issue of the procurement, you see, you remember the famous otchere criminal trial? So in 2009, when the NDC came to power under Professor Mills, then the issue of this rice importation by NIB came up.
Yeah,
Daniel Jima.
Yes.
So Daniel Jima and otchere were then prosecuted by the then NDC administration. Okay. They went to court, and one of the charges was that at the time they awarded the contract for the rice importation, they did not get the necessary approval from the PPA. Okay? So when it happened that way, the trial judge in this matter asked them to open their defense, because prima facie there was evidence that they never got the approval of the PPA. So the matter went to the Court of Appeal, and I had to bring in this because of So the matter went to the Court of Appeal. I think Quorum Justice Justice Apao. He wrote the lead judgment. And in the lead judgment of His Lordship Justice Yao Apao, he said, look, if you look at Section 15 of the PPA Act, it provides scope of applicability. And that the NIB, even though it is 100% owned by government of Ghana, you understand? By government of Ghana, it is not subject to the PPA Act. And that is how come Daniel Jima and otchere were acquitted at the Court of Appeal, even though, you see, so what happened was that after the prosecution closed his case, they did a submission of no case.
Right.
Then the High Court judge said, no, you have a case to answer. Then they appealed the decision of the High Court, calling on them to open their defense to the Court of Appeal. In the ruling of the Court of Appeal took the view that even though NIB is 100% shared by government of Ghana, to the extent that it is a limited liability company, it is exempt from the requirement of sections 15 of the PPA Act.
Yo, it is for Winnie and someone about beto. Yapuno so Mikao say so. When you subscribe to channel idea, Bomodi say over subscribe. Now, while like video, don't give us a thumbs up. Nafi share my wofufro so that when you be here now, and someone ekoso ewo Ghana memoir. Also, bet me otchere wondering afaye. Some way you know ewo comment box in mo. Mobeti minkabi in my next video.
Thanks for watching. Like and share the video. You can also drop your comment. Please don't forget to subscribe. Click on the bell to turn on the notification.